Okay, let's take a look at the graph that you plotted. You've got all of your star data on your graph, and as you look at your graph, you might notice a few things. You might notice that the colors on your graph are kind of clustered together. For example, most of your blue stars are over here on the left-hand side. Most of your red stars are over there on the right-hand side. You've got your yellows in the middle. You might notice that there's a bunch of white stars that are down in the lower kind of left-hand side. If you're hearing a weird noise in the background, that's my dog eating an ice cube, and I'm sorry. I'm trying to get this done. And he's noisy. That's Jasper. He is a very good dog, except when he's making noise when I need to do something. And if you look at the rest of your graph, let's remind ourselves of what we were actually looking at when we were plotting the data. First of all, on that horizontal axis, we were looking at how hot the star is, okay, the surface temperature of the star. And stars that were very hot, they were going to plot over here on the left-hand side of the diagram. And stars that were fairly cool, those we're going to plot over on the right-hand side. If you look at the y-axis, that's luminosity, or how bright the stars are. The brightest stars are going to plot at the top of our diagram. So right here is where bright stars plot. And stars that are very dim or hard to see, those are going to plot toward the bottom. And lastly, if you just look at how big the stars are in general, the big stars are going to plot on the top of the diagram, and the small stars are going to plot on the bottom of the diagram. Okay, that information is really important, so I want you to stop the video if you need to, and I want you to copy that onto your graph, because you're going to be asked a bunch of questions informative, and those labels are going to help you answer those questions. And then just start the video again once you've got everything. Everything that I do and that you see on this graph, I want you to copy onto your graph, okay? Now, you probably have noticed that the stars on your graph are kind of, you see some patterns there. The first thing that you might notice is you might notice this sort of straight line-ish feature or rectangular feature that's diagonal across the middle of your graph. It includes blue stars, white, yellow, orange, red. It has all the different colors in it. And this is what we call the main sequence, okay? So this is where main sequence stars are going to plot on this diagram. These are the stars that are in the main part of their life cycle. They might be pretty big and hot, like our blue stars in the upper upper left-hand sort of corner of that rectangle. Or they might be really cool small little stars, like the little red dwarf stars at the bottom right. The most important thing here is that we have stars here. Most of them are going to be dwarf stars. And these stars are fusing hydrogen to helium in the main sequence part of their life. Now, you also may notice some blue stars that are kind of up above that main sequence line. Those are going to be your blue giants. Those are very hot, very big stars. You're also going to notice that you have this area over here where up above the main sequence you've got red stars. These are going to be your red giants and your red supergiants. Now, remember that your red giants and your red supergiants, these are stars that are in the last stages of their life. They're close to death. and they are fusing maybe helium to carbon. They may also be fusing carbon to iron, like everything up to iron. And at that point, when they start fusing iron, they're done. They can't fuse anything else. So we've got our main sequence, the kind of adult phase of a star's life down the center diagonally. We have blue giants on the upper left-hand side. We have our red giants and supergiants up on the right-hand side. Those are our big red stars. And then there's this last little group of stars down here, and these are our white dwarfs. Now remember, a white dwarf star is technically not even really a star anymore, because with a white dwarf star, there is no fusion happening. These are the dead core of a star that has lived its life. It's gone through the main sequence and its red giant or supergiant phase, and it ends up blowing off a lot of the layers, the outer layers of the star when it dies. And that core that's left is very dense. It's still very hot, and we call that the white dwarf. So what's kind of interesting here is that you can get stars that basically, one star over the course of its life can plot in a couple of different areas on this graph. It can start in the main sequence. Once it actually is done fusing hydrogen to helium, when it runs out of hydrogen, it will go up and it will become a red giant. And as a red giant, it's going to fuse helium into carbon, or even it's going to fuse even heavier elements than that, up to iron. And once that happens, and it runs out of everything it can fuse, it's going to go through a process of dying, and then it's going to actually come down here and become a white dwarf. And so depending on where a star plots on this diagram, not only do we know whether it's hot or cool, dim or bright, blue or red, big or small, we also know what stage of life is it in. Now, I want you to look at your diagram. I want you to kind of draw in, to the best of your ability, I want you to draw in the main sequence. Just kind of make a rectangle around the main sequence area. Make a circle around your white dwarfs, your blue giants, your red giants, and your red supergiants. And then I want you to go in and answer the rest of the questions in the formative that are assigned. It's going to ask you to find, for example, find a star that is, let's say, find a star that is bright and hot. So you would come over to the left-hand side where all the hot stars are, the blue stars. Then you would go way up to where all the bright stars are. And any of these stars, those are your hot, bright stars. And so you would choose whichever one of those, or you would identify one, and you would have to say, is this bright? Is it hot? Is it in the main sequence part of its life? And so you're going to go through the questions, and they're going to ask you, look at this star right here. Let's say we looked at this star right there. It's going to ask you about that star. Well, what can I say about that star using my Hertzsprung-Russell diagram, which is what this graph is called? I can say, number one, I can say that star is small. It's a dwarf star. It's fusing hydrogen to helium. It is in the main sequence part of its life. It's dim. It's not very bright. I can just look at the graph and I can say all of these things about it. I'm going to erase just to help this not be quite so crazy. I'm going to erase that so that I leave you with a good graph here. Okay. So it's going to select stars. It's going to ask you questions. You need to talk about what stage of its life cycle is it in. Is it bright or dim? Is it hot or cold? Is it big or small? Do your best to answer the questions. Help each other. Talk to the kids at your table. You're all helping each other. You're in this together. Nobody succeeds in life or in classes alone. You need each other to help each other. Any questions you have, I will be back on Monday, or I guess we have an I day on Monday. So I will see you guys next week, and we can talk. But if you have questions, you can also message me in Teams. I will be here. Okay? Have a great day. I will talk to you guys next week.